As we look at surface transportation, it's an opportunity to see what we focused on in the past and what we need to focus on in the future. And one of the things that seems striking to me is that we've not paid much attention to the movement of people. And by people, I mean tourists. We've considered road miles, we've looked at population, we look at freight movement, all when we're considering resources or revenue, but not actually the movement of people. Now, this is important to me. I represent the heart of the Las Vegas Valley. We welcome over 42 million tourists every year. Now, some of them drive from Utah, Arizona, Southern California. Some of them fly into McCarran, which is the 7th busiest airport. Hopefully, some will be coming by speed train sometime in the future. So we have to deal with getting them there and then moving them around once they get there. Our MPO and the Las Vegas Convention Authority, RTC, all work together to try to plan to how to accommodate them. So it's part of our planning process, but we don't have the resources to take into account all these visitors. So I would ask Mayor Nirenberg and Ms. McMillan to address this. I know, Mayor, I've had the pleasure of welcoming the San Antonio, Visit San Antonio folks. They've come to my office. I co-chair the Travel and Tourism Caucus, so they describe some of the same problems. I believe I saw you had 37 million visitors a year. And then San Francisco welcomes about 26 million visitors a year, and that doesn't count Napa Valley. So again, you have some of the same kind of problems. So I would ask you to talk a little bit about how you meet the needs of moving visitors around, and if you would support including visitors as a metric for determining funding. That's the first question. And then second, what do you think about the possibility of having a national travel mobility program, kind of like we have the freight mobility program, that takes into account some alternative projects that enhance travel and moving tourists around and look at connectivity among major tourist destinations?
Well, thank you very much for making that note. Visitors are in the visitor industry certainly is a bedrock of San Antonio's economy and will remain that way and has impacts on our transportation system. I think that's an extension of how we're trying to build a multimodal transportation system for the future, that actually our vision for success is how we move people around and give consumers choice in how they move around. We're integrating last mile transit, as the gentleman said earlier, from scooters to bike share to other elements, and being able to build walkable communities and plan our land use around that. But we also have to give people options on how they can move from the main hauls, whether it's via public transportation, transit lines, a rental car, Uber and Lyft, rideshare types of modes, but we're trying to integrate everything. Our philosophy on transportation for the future, whether it's a visitor or resident, is all of the above.
Well, you didn't answer my question, though. Would you support including visitors as part of a metric for funding?
Absolutely would, yes, ma'am.
And you think it's a good idea to have a national travel plan as well as a freight plan?
Obviously, we'd have to learn more about that, but sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with a lot of what was observed and said here. I think I would note that actually under the FAST Act, one of the things that changed under the planning rules was that we need to look at tourism.
Yes,
as
that
part
was
of
my
the,
bill. I remember it very well.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm coming back to it, so I apologize and give you kudos for adding that in. But I think one of the things that is that whole idea of choice is really important, particularly for tourists, because unlike the type of planning we would do and we can anticipate who has jobs and where the jobs are located, at least to some degree have a predictability about where they want to go, I think with our tourist community, that's really different. So things that we're beginning to tackle now and have to think about how funding dollars can best accommodate it are the very information-driven improvements that we're thinking about. We have all these choices, but how do we get the information out to people to use it in terms of the apps and the new technologies related to that? What I'm beginning to see, certainly when I was with FTA, is these new needs of how we use what we have differently, and particularly, again, the choices and availability and nimbleness to move or adjust them to peaks that might, accommodate seasonal or tourist travel is something that is a very different funding source than building a lot of infrastructure. And sometimes our federal as well as state, dollars have been designed on eligibilities that are linked to that more traditional infrastructure structure. And we have to rethink that in terms of overlays on infrastructure that are much more nimble and fast moving. So it's something I think overall we need to look to in our investment programs.
Thank you. I yield back.